into the Fade. I'm Clay Travis. She is Kelly Stewart. You can find her at Kelly in Vegas. You can find me at Clay Travis. We started off the show. I think my shoulder is now dry. Kelly told me that I looked a mess, and that is accurate because I just got back from LA, where I've been gone for the last several days. I'm excited to be back. We had, at least I did. I don't know if you actually won some money or not, Kelly. Finally, I won in both college football and the NFL, which has been few and far between so far. But did you see the story last week? I think it was last week. It might have been 2 weeks ago. I meant to mention it with you, where FanDuel and DraftKings are actually losing money because so many favorites have been winning in the NFL that they had to adjust their quarterly earnings schedule. Did you see that?
Of course. Clay, it has been a monstrous NFL season. Like, just the first 5 weeks, Survivor kind of told you the tale, how many favorites lost outright, moneyline parlays, teasers, all those things, right? Because that's how recreational bettors get to the window, right? Whether it's on the app or at a sports book, they're not making straight bets. And if they're looking at favorites, they're probably putting them in a moneyline parlay. I could see them absolutely getting crushed. I mean, I know several bookmakers still in Las Vegas, and it's been a tough run. I mean, I do a show on Sunday mornings called Last Call. So we check in with the bookmaker. All right, what are you guys seeing? What's your biggest need? They went 0-5 again on Sunday. I almost just have to cancel that show unless you just want to fade the words coming out of his mouth, because it has just been horrific since I think week 5 or week 6. And it sucks because that's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at underdogs that I think can win outright. And last week I did have the Steelers, so that was good. But I also had the Patriots, which was rather frustrating. So listen, NFL has been kind of one of those weird seasons where it started off really good and has just crashed and burned. So yeah, it does not surprise me to see, big books like that spend millions of dollars on marketing and have unlimited resources. Eventually the public's going to win. And when they do, guess who's going to come calling? Your investors.
By the way, we're taping this now on Friday, which is a little bit different because my schedule's been chaotic. Kelly's got a little bit of a chaotic schedule, some too, but this is me because I was out of town. Last night I won. Did you watch last night's game? I mean, it was pretty awesome in the snow. I took the over. It looked like a moronic decision late in the first half. It was 7-3 or 10-3, I think, at the half. Nobody was scoring. Then the snow starts coming down. And then the points start raining down, too. I thought that was one of the most fun Thursday night football games we have had in a very long time. You're in Florida, so you probably haven't had any suggestion at all that it's remotely close to fall or winter. Even in Nashville, where I am, I mean, it's been basically 65 or 70 and sunny all the way through. So the idea that basically a blizzard hit in Cleveland, it was the first time I've thought, oh, yeah, it's actually winter now. Did you watch? Did you enjoy it as much as I did?
So it's funny because I kept saying, like, you know what? If I take the 3.5 with the Browns, they're going to lose 14-10. This is going to be an absolute snooze fest. Obviously, the under got hammered early in the week because there was reports that not only was it going to be blizzard, but there was going to be wind, which we all know is the number one deciding factor in terms of weather affecting totals in football games. So I kind of said, all right, I'm going to take a back seat because otherwise it's going to be 14-10 and I'm going to be very, very angry. But we had some people over. Everybody was like really enjoying it. I said, all right, it's, middle of the second quarter. I'm going to go to bed. This is a snooze fest. And then the snow started coming down and it was awesome. I mean, all of a sudden that game just kind of turned on a dime. Plus, I just love Jameis Winston so much. Like, I just can't get enough of him. And so to see him after the game, like, sliding in the snow, getting some of his like other offensive linemen and players to like do snow angels, I actually thought it was enjoyable. So to have two like back-to-back Thursday night games where like I didn't want to go to bed was kind of fun.
Let's stick in the NFL here for a minute. Again, we're talking on Friday morning because inevitably something happens. So like, you didn't talk about, well, yeah, okay, we're taping it Friday morning. It's a little bit after 10 a.m. on the East Coast. How much of a disaster are the Cowboys? And at what point, because I took Washington this week, even though they're a double-digit favorite, at what point does the number, Kelly, get so outrageous that you have to buy back in on the Cowboys? Because right now they're a dumpster fire. They can't score. Dak obviously is out. CeeDee Lamb seems at times disinterested. They're not great on the offensive line. They can't run the ball. Suddenly they're missing even field goals. I'm taking Washington to blow them out. but a double-digit line in the NFL is fairly rare. At what point, even though you may think the Cowboys are a dumpster fire, does the number become so intensely excessive that you feel obligated to buy back in on them?
Look, 2 weeks ago, I said it was excessive against the Eagles in a divisional rivalry game with Cooper Rush, who has been on the team for 4 years and should be able to run that offense. But the reality is they're banged up. They've been banged up all season long. They're still coached by an absolute boneheaded McCarthy. They're not making any adjustments. I think it's definitely overblown. But until I see a team whose opponent's defense doesn't outscore their offense in the second half of a game, I can't touch this Cowboys team. That was insane last week. I could not believe how piss poor the Cowboys looked. Washington has been a absolute horrendous favorite against Dallas, 8-25-1 historically. But this is a completely different Commanders team at this point in time, Clay. I'm with you. I think it's Commanders or Pats because I haven't seen enough from Dallas that tells me that they can go toe-to-toe with this Washington offense. I know defensively, Washington's not anything to write home about, and the back door could absolutely be open here. But I got to see some sort of spark. They can't get the running game going. CeeDee Lamb is in and out of the offensive play calls, and Cooper Rush has been just downright dreadful.
All right, so you're with me basically on Washington. Here's some more NFL picks that I'm on, Kelly. Speaking of dreadful, the Titans are a mess. They're not good on offense. They're not good on defense. They don't seem particularly well coached. They're awful on special teams. They're going on the road against the Texans. I know the Texans aren't perfect. They're going to win the AFC South fairly comfortably, I think. Number out around 7.5. I'm taking the Texans in a good team versus bad team scenario. I know it's division. Speaking of good team, bad team, I'm taking the Lions as a touchdown favorite on the road against the Colts. Do you have either of those that you are playing in your NFL mix?
So I can definitely tell you that you and I are opposite on one. I will also tell you that Tennessee at 8 took sharp money early in the week. And I said, wait a minute, what? After what we just saw Houston do to Dallas, I know this line is a little steep. I am taking Houston in my survivor pool this week. They've won and covered 3 straight against Tennessee, and by a hefty margin, right? Double digits in all 3 of those. I understand that this is a Titans team that we'll say this, a nice thing to say about them. Defensively, they've got it figured out. Offensively, Will Levis is an absolute menace. We don't know whether he's going to throw a pick 6 or a touchdown pass. And sometimes that can be exciting, but I just do not see Tennessee in their 4th road game in 6 weeks being able to go in and beat Houston. So I did use Houston in my survivor pool, but I am on the Colts. I took the 7.5 with the Colts early on in the week. This is a really interesting spot for Detroit, right? Who has just been manhandling everyone. Last week, everybody thought, okay, Jacksonville, they're just gonna go down to Jacksonville, get the win. They don't need to do anything fancy, and then they won 52-6. I mean, it was just a bloodbath. I was against Detroit a couple weeks ago against Minnesota, and I thought, all right, Minnesota's got a real shot here at home. And then, of course, I was against the Lions with the Texans, and Jared Goff threw 5 interceptions, and the Texans still didn't win the football game. So I figure, why not step in front of the freight train with the 7.5 here? The Colts have finally decided Anthony Richardson is how they can win games. Do I think they can win games? I think this is going to be a really tough uphill slide to be able to win, but 7.5 was too many for an NFL home underdog for me to pass up.
All right. Well, what do you like the most? Is there anything you really liking looking into the NFL slate?
The only other thing I played was the Green Bay Packers. I think San Francisco showed us last week late. They've showed us several times, especially in the division, that they don't have what it takes to win football games. And albeit they've been banged up all season long. But I think we have a Jordan Love led Packers team, that if he does not throw ridiculous interceptions, would have a much better record, right? We've seen several times this year where he is almost like a good version of Will Levis, but he throws those interceptions in the worst possible times. But he does have 16 touchdown passes. His O-line does not allow him to get sacked. He's got time. I think that this is a get right spot for Green Bay. We were talking about weather earlier in the show. It's going to be cold. It's going to be miserable. And that is exactly where the Packers thrive.
You and I are on the same side on the Packers. That's one of my other OutKick six packs is the Packers against the 49ers. Last one I've got, Kelly, is I like the Cardinals on the road against the Seahawks. Cardinals having kind of an under-the-radar good season. I don't feel like they get very much attention. Seahawks have been up and down, inconsistent. I know it's a divisional game. I like Kyler Murray and company to go on the road and get that win. So that's my 6 in the NFL. Anything else that sticks out to you?
Yeah, Seahawks only 1-7 in the division. They're at home lately. They do better on the road. So I'm with you there with Arizona. We'll kind of see how they end up playing, but nothing else in the NFL. As I mentioned, NFL started off really good and it has just completely derailed. So I'm keeping my card very light. Happy to be alive in the $1 Million Survivor contest. And so that's where my focus has really been, of trying to just pick winners as opposed to.
How many people are left?
10 got eliminated last night with the Steelers.
They probably took the Steelers last night. Yeah.
They did. So right now, let me double check. 62 out of 11,112 are remaining.
So what money do you get as you come down the stretch here? Is there any, if you finish in the top 100, you get money, or is it just
winner take all? It's
when
do
you
nuts.
anticipate, if there's 62 left, when do you anticipate it actually getting resolved?
So this one's a little different. They front loaded the contest up into the first 11 weeks, and then starting weeks 12 through 18, you have double picks. So compared to some like the Vegas contest or others, it's a different strategy, right? So we all know I'm kind of a nerd. I learned it from Todd Furman. Have your spreadsheets. So I've kind of mapped it out. I'm pretty much screwed next week because I'm going to take Kansas City, but I don't have another team that I absolutely love. So I'm going to have Kansas City as a huge favorite over the Raiders, and then probably a roll of the dice. I think it's going to be really, really interesting here down the stretch. It's going to be hard to hedge too, right? Like this isn't a traditional survivor pool where you could bet the other side, especially because you have 2 games. So I think we're going to see it probably go 18 weeks, but hopefully a lot of people get knocked out over the next couple of weeks, so I can take a big sigh of relief, get through the tough part, because weeks 15, 16, 17, and 18, I have a very clear path.
All right, let's dive into the college football side of the equation as we come down the stretch run now of the season. 2 regular season weeks left, and then the conference championship games, and maybe a consequential Army-Navy game as well that could play in here. I've got a bunch. I finally had a winning season. Let's start here, Kelly, with games that I think could be actually, and I tried to bet and focus on games that actually have playoff ramifications. So I'm going to give you a bunch of these. And let me just say this off the top, by the way, and I don't know how much attention you pay to this, but a lot of people out there, I think, believe that lots of favorites are more likely to all win than they are. In other words, if you just did a money line parlay, I was playing around with this weekend. People are always like, there's not going to be any drama. Let me just give you this. If you roll Ole Miss to beat Florida, if you take Ohio State to beat Indiana, all the favorites basically, Texas to beat Kentucky, Minnesota to beat Penn State, A&M to beat Auburn, Alabama to beat Oklahoma. If you just roll all those together,
you mean Penn State to beat Minnesota?
Yeah, sorry, I flipped that. Penn State, all of the favorites that are in the playoff right now, if you just rolled all those together and all of the money line parlays had to hit, you're talking about a 3.5 to 1 payout. In other words, to flip that, you are almost assured that one of these substantial favorites that is in the playoff mix right now, probably 2, are going to lose before all is said and done just this weekend, before we even go into next weekend. In other words, if you're out there and you're like, your team is a little bit outside of the playoff, like I'm a Tennessee fan. If you can win, if your team can win out and they're in the mix, they're probably going to make the playoff, Kelly. I feel like there's a lot of people out there talking like, oh, they're not doing the basic math, but a lot of favorites all stacked together in a money line parlay is almost assuredly not going to hit down the stretch. There are going to be a couple of major upsets that people don't forecast by and large that are going to completely change the complexion of the playoff. I mean, I'm sure you know this, but I think a lot of people out there that are college football fans just don't stack together favorites and understand how difficult it is for all of the favorites to hit if that's what you're expecting to happen.
Boy, I've made an entire career off doing the exact opposite. I mean, I'm looking for those outright underdog winners. Last week, all three teams covered against the spread. Nebraska, phantom pass interference call. All of a sudden, I don't then get to cash Nebraska on the money line. Wisconsin took Oregon to the absolute wire. I mean, these are things that happen. College football is full of chaos. This year, I will say, I feel like there's been a little less chaos than normal. I've had a lot of dogs cover, but not win outright. So, hey, this may be the week that everybody covers. But yeah, I would highly recommend doing big money line parlays with favorites such as that. I would love to see some massive upsets this weekend and shake things off, especially if Florida can beat Ole Miss.
Yeah, let's start there. So I've got basically 5 games right off the top that I bet that are relatively early kickoffs on Saturday. Kelly, I took UVA plus the points against SMU. Right now, SMU would be in the ACC title game against Miami. I took Florida, to your point. DJ Lagway is playing really well. And Florida at home playing very, very good, basically since October when Lagway has been healthy enough to play. I took Indiana plus the points on the road against Ohio State. I took Kentucky plus the points on the road against Texas, and I took Minnesota and the under at home against Penn State. All right, that's 5 underdogs. I bet on all the underdogs. My theory being here, Kelly, that the pressure is getting ratcheted up on the favorites as we come down the home stretch. Several of these teams also have monster games next week. Texas A&M. You've got Ole Miss coming back with the Egg Bowl. You got SMU under pressure. What of those? Those are 5 underdogs in big time, early kick Saturday. Do you like any of them?
So I'm going to give you a little fun stat. My good friend Mark puts together these newsletters, and they're my favorite to read after I make my picks because I don't want him influencing me because he's so good.
Yep.
But I may add a couple of teams that you just mentioned as far as the dog perspective goes, because something to consider here. There are 13 ranked teams in the AP that have 0 wins against currently ranked teams in the AP. Those teams are Texas,
that's a great
Indiana,
stat.
Miami, SMU, A&M, Colorado, Clemson, Army, Tulane, State, UP, Washington State. Are you kidding me? Texas is number 3 in the country. And that is going to give me enough to get on board with you on Kentucky. Look, this is too many points. By all means, I don't want to take away from Texas and some of their really great wins that they've had this year, right? But as soon as you put them up against a better competition, what happens? They falter. 20.5 points is exactly that for a reason. If they thought Texas was going to blow Kentucky out, it'd be 21.5. Kentucky, 18-5 outright and 18-4 against the spread when coming off a non-conference home game, including 10-0 against the spread on the road. As you know, they got it done against Murray State. One of my least favorite things about your conference, Clay, is that in the middle of November, you guys just get to play random cupcakes. But sometimes that's good, right? It's good for your team to get healthy. It's good for your team to get their offense organized. So actually, when you said Kentucky, I said, all right, they're on my long list. I agree with you here. I think this is a good spot to take the 20.5.
I'll also mention on Kentucky, Kelly, their defense has been fairly solid for much of the year. They've had a lot of injury issues of late, but they were good enough to go on the road and beat Ole Miss in Oxford, which is, again, a pretty incredible win when you look at Ole Miss. The other one is Remember, they almost beat Georgia in Lexington. They were very much in the mix to win that game. When they have played at a high level, they've been capable of beating top 10 caliber teams. And so I think that number is out of whack, particularly when you consider that Texas, it's really kind of a trap game. Arkansas, they were on the road. Arkansas hates Texas. It's a pretty good rivalry game. Next week, they're going to be on the road in Aggieland for a just Donnybrook of a game against Texas A&M. And so I think this is kind of hiding out there. Early kick in Austin. I like Kentucky quite a bit. Let me hit you with a couple of more that are in the Big 12 because I know your beloved Kansas State team is in the Big 12. I've got Arizona State to beat BYU, Kelly. BYU lost at home to Kansas. I know your hated Kansas team. Arizona State, one of the best stories probably of the year in college football. And then I've got Kansas plus the points against Colorado. Feels like everybody's in love with Colorado right now. You have Shador talking about how not only is he the best quarterback in this year's draft, he feels like he was the best quarterback in last year's draft. There's a five-star quarterback that's committed, but also talk that Deion is in the mix for the Cowboy job. You've got the leading Heisman Trophy contender in Travis Hunter. All of these things stacked up. It feels like there's a lot of hype and a lot of talk. So I'm taking Kansas at home. I'm taking Arizona State at home. Do you like either of those?
Yeah, I was on BYU last week, and that game could have went either way. It did not go my way in the fourth quarter. Bottom line, you throw a couple picks, and that's kind of what happens. But I'll leave it at this. I think laying points with the unranked team versus the ranked team is usually worth a second look, and that is the situation that falls there with Arizona State. I watched Arizona State last weekend. I think Kenny Dillingham is doing a very good job. This Sun Devils team is very physical on both sides of the ball. Look, BYU has been trending downward for several weeks now, and Kansas got the best of them. I think Arizona State does the same. I am also on the Jayhawks. I've had this game circled for weeks now. I was on the Jayhawks 2 weeks ago. Then I was against them last week. I'm back on them. So as much as people say I hate this team, that is factually incorrect. I just hate their fans. There's a difference, Clay. Most of their fans are insufferable. Okay, you can search my Twitter mentions for that. But you know who else's fans are insufferable? Colorado's. I just mentioned they have no top 25 wins. Well, guess what? Lance Leopold Jayhawks, they have two back-to-back, in fact, Iowa State and BYU. I think this is going to be their third straight. Unfortunately, they're going to not get to go to a very good bowl game, but they're going to be able to keep Colorado potentially out of the Big 12 championship and or the college football playoff. So that's good enough for me.
Okay. First of all, let me pause here. Do you love any games in particular in the college football slate? Because I still got a bunch left, but I'm curious if we overlap at all on any of these remainders.
Yeah, I'll run through the three that are my three favorite dogs real quick. I like Maryland plus 6.5. Now we do have news out that McNamara isn't going to play. I gave this out earlier in the week on Wednesday, and then I had put it in my parlay because I think they can win this game outright. I think a lot of people are celebrating these Iowa games going over the total, but instead they should be asking where the hell the Iowa defense is. I know Maryland is not a team to write home about, but they're going to own the time of possession. They're going to run a ton of plays, and I don't think that 6.5 is a fair number, which is probably gone. I apologize. I do not have the odds screen open. Love Vandy. I think Vandy, this line is entirely too high. You have LSU on a 3-game slide.
I've got Vandy too.
Brian Kelly, I don't know if he's going to get to keep his job or not. They can probably not afford to fire him, but I could be very wrong about that because we've seen lots of universities be able to fire coaches and pay them for the next decade. Vanderbilt, 4 outright upsets this year. And if you guys remember, I've been against the Tigers defense several times this year. I understand offensively they can get going, but I think if Vandy can make a couple of stops, they can win this game in Death Valley. And then Florida, Billy Napier, speaking of getting the savior job, 25-13-1 as a home underdog in his career. Jackson Dart, I think, is going to have a very long day unless his offensive linemen can match up well. against that defensive front of the Gators. They absolutely wrecked LSU last week. I hope they have the horses offensively to be able to keep up, but defensively, I'm catching 11 with the Gators in the swamp. I think it's going to be a really close game. So I did take the plus 330 on the money line as well.
All right, we agree on both Ole Miss, as we talked about a little bit earlier, having trouble at Florida, so I'm on the Gators. I also took Vandy, and I think there's a decent chance they win this game outright. Coming off of a bye week, I think you mentioned as well is the other part of this that I like. LSU loses their number one overall quarterback. It just feels like Brian Kelly every day gets another body blow there. So we are in agreement. A couple more that I've got. Mizzou on the road at Mississippi State. I'm on a lot of underdogs this week, Kelly. I'm taking Mississippi State plus the 7.5 at home, and I'm going on the over. Mississippi State's offense has played well. I feel like Mizzou, now that they lost against South Carolina, and I thought they played pretty well in that game, they haven't, generally speaking, been very good on the road. Blown out against A&M, blown out against Alabama, lose a tough one against South Carolina. Now they come back on the road again, Kelly. I wouldn't shock me if they go 0-4 on the road in the SEC this year. I got Army, and I know this game's in New York City. I should have added it to the money line parlay that I was talking about earlier, plus the 14.5 against Notre Dame. If you have a pulse, if you have a soul, you are rooting for Army to beat Notre Dame unless you are a diehard Fighting Irish fan. That would also obviously have a lot of implications when it comes to the college football playoff picture. Auburn. I like Auburn to win this game outright against A&M. Kelly, they're right at a 2.5-point underdog, and I also like the under. Hugh Freeze's team, much like Kansas, actually, I think is way better than their record is. This is a team that should be in the top 30, top 35-ish in terms of overall talent. And then I'm taking Oklahoma, who has been an awful disaster in year one in the SEC. They only have one win. They went on the road and pulled off an upset. They shouldn't have beat them, of Auburn. And so with 2 weeks to get ready, Brent Venables, we know, has played against Alabama a lot over the years. Very good defensive coordinator. Night game in Norman. I like Oklahoma to keep that game close. So I'm on a ton of underdogs this week. Do you like or have any strong takes? Again, Oklahoma, Auburn, Army, and Mississippi State, all underdogs. I'm basically on, for the most part, underdogs all week.
Yeah, I love to see it, Clay. I just hope that you and I are correct and not mushing one another. Usually when we agree, it is not a good thing. But I do like Auburn as well. I think that line, that very low number of plus 2.5 is very telling. A&M, hey, they've rattled off some nice wins here as of late. Man, look. And then they lose to South Carolina 44-20. And I think that right there is kind of the defining factor of what this season has been for the Aggies. 1-5 on the road as chalk, right? Being a favorite in conference has been awful for this team. So here we are again. And I understand that Auburn, as you said, is similar to KU. They have a more talented team. One-score games definitely did not go their way. I think everything kind of got derailed after I called that Cal upset there in Auburn. So I like Auburn here. I'll see if I can't get to the window with them. You mentioned Virginia early on. That was a game that was not on my radar. Virginia was really good to me a couple of weeks ago. They're against Pitt. I may have to give them a second nod over SMU. And that's really about it. I like Nebraska. One of the favorites I did bet over Wisconsin. Wisconsin had their absolute utter guts ripped out last week. I know Nebraska did as well, but Nebraska did not have the high hopes that Wisconsin did this season. I think that you see this Nebraska offense kind of clicking to be a little bit better with Dana Holgerson calling the plays. Now, albeit I would have really liked Dylan Raiola not to throw 2 picks last week against USC. But if he can clean that up, I think that they are the side here against a Wisconsin team who absolutely got just demolished at home, losing by 3 to Oregon.
Kelly, all these picks, I saw this financial thing, and I thought you would be, I don't even know if you've seen this. I thought you would find this reaction interesting. I'm going to talk about it on OutKick the show, too. But did you see this graphic? Different generations were asked what salary you had to make in order to be considered financially successful. Have you seen this?
I have not.
All right, so I want to just get your reaction to this, all right? So boomers, that is people who were born right after, World War II ended, all the way up to 1964. They said you need to make right at $100,000. Now, this is going to be inflation adjusted, obviously, for the lifestyle. You know, if you were born in 1946, you're probably retired. This is like my parents' age.
Yeah, my dad was born in
100,000.
1946.
All right, my mom and dad were born in 44. So I can see it like $100,000 was a good target to a large extent for that, okay? Gen X, I am the oldest Gen X, youngest Gen X.
Yeah.
Gen X, $212,000 to be considered financially successful. Millennials,
Me.
born, by the way, at 81, that's what you are, is $180,000 to be considered financially successful, okay? So I saw all three of these numbers, and I said, okay, boomers, Gen X, millennials. Okay, that seems rational. I want to get your reaction to this. Gen Z, that is people who were born 1997 to 2012. In order to be considered financially successful, you have to make $588,000. All right? So this is their answer to the question of what is financially successful. Is this not a perfect distillation of Instagram? Because I think all these kids, and I say kids because I'm getting to be an old guy, have no real conception for what anybody makes. But on Instagram, you're living the lifestyle of, oh, I'm going to go on this exotic vacation. Oh, I'm going to be wearing these clothes. They live in the most profoundly bullshit-laden era of all time. But how wild is that to go nearly triple what any other generation thinks you have to make financially successful? So I was just curious, what's your reaction?
Yeah, over the last couple of weeks, I thought, man, maybe I should have been a Gen Zer. And now I know I should have been a Gen Zer because that is exactly the number that I had in mind, like $500,000 a year to be like financially secure and be seen as successful. So listen, I don't disagree with them. I think the interesting part about living in reality is that doesn't have to be the case. But I know a lot of people who are making it well above that are financially struggling, because then you go and have 3 or 4 kids, and then you have to have this house because, the reality is, yes, I agree with you on the Instagram thing, but I also think these kids, and if we've seen anything from their political side of things, they are overachievers. They want to achieve more, right? I feel like the boomers were kind of spoiled brats, our parents, right? After war, they came back home and the economy was booming. And I like to tease my parents about that. But I think these kids are like, nah, we need more. I want that vacation. I want that outfit. I want that car. So I have to do more to get it.
All right. We will be back next week. I thought you would enjoy that. Tuesday, we're going to do the show Tuesday because I know a lot of you are going to be traveling. It's Thanksgiving week. And so we're going to do the show Tuesday. And so we'll be a little bit early, but obviously you got football games Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, like lots of football to load up on. So Kelly, have happy early Thanksgiving, but we will be with everyone on Tuesday. And we hope we can have another good winning week. There you got it. College football and the NFL. The Fade. Follow her on Twitter. What's your Twitter handle? Is it still at Kelly in Vegas? I don't know anybody's Twitter handle anymore. We lost your audio somehow. Yes, it's still at. We're back. You're back. I don't know. Maybe it was just me. All right. We will see you then. Go get rich, kids, especially if you're in Gen Z. You got a lot of money you need to make, and we will see you next week.